So maybe you can explain what Game of Chains is and how it's structured. There's also like a competition involved with prices, and what are some of the numbers, like how many projects sign up or how many validators sign up, and yeah, what's the current stage on that?
Yeah, totally. So Game of Chains is an adversarial testnet launching November 7th. Well, we're going to kick it off on November 7th. That's Monday. And it is the third in a sort of series of games, incentivized games that we've had on the Cosmos Hub. The first one was Game of Stakes when Proof of Stake launched. And then the second one was Game of Zones when IBC launched. And this is Game of Chains with the launch of interchain security. And the goals of this, like you said, are basically to help validators kind of build confidence around this new technology. We're expecting the sort of like operational work for validators to shift quite a bit once interchain security launches, right? There'll be voting on new proposals, trying to like assess, the quality of new consumer chains that are launching. They'll also have to expand their node operations because, you'll be running binaries for all these new chains that are launching. So first, the goal is to kind of help them understand, what is this new workflow going to look like for them? You can think of it kind of like a training program for them. And then the second, it's an adversarial testnet, is also to help us kind of discover what are some of the interesting attack vectors in interchain security and help us like uncover any sort of like critical issues or bugs and so on before the launch of interchain security happens on the mainnet. So we can kind of address those beforehand. And we have like a bunch of tasks, challenges planned for people. I think we have like over 80 Cosmos Hub validators that have signed up for it. And there's a prize pool of 20,000 atoms total for, people achieving various milestones. And there's also some cumulative prizes at the end for overall winners. And we're also trying to incentivize people to, build new tools, some new sort of public goods for the interchain security paradigm. So that is all kind of incentivized as well. Johan, do you want to add a few things?
Yeah, I could just not necessarily on the testnet. I mean, we're also going to be having several real consumer chains in the testnet.
Oh yeah.
So that's going to be exciting. I want to add on the validator workload and the entire process around interchain security. That's been a big focus for me and Udit. Is kind of figuring out how we can make sure that consumer chain upgrades and launches and upgrades and everything all go really smoothly, and also without being a huge load on validators. So we basically have this is for production, not just the testnet, obviously. So we kind of have a whole plan of how we can kind of steward consumer chains through the process, kind of like what parts of the process are our responsibility from working on the Cosmos Hub, and then what parts are the people who are working on the consumer chains responsibility, and then also technically. In the past couple months, me and my team, we've been going through the kind of attack vectors. So interchain security, replicated security, V1. It sort of does suppose that validators are looking at the consumer chains that are coming in and making sure they're not malicious. But we're also trying to make as possible, make sure as much as possible that basically, even if the consumer chain is malicious, it can't like harm the hub or harm the validators. And so that will also help. That will help reduce workload because you don't have to really check them as carefully. It'll be like validators can kind of just, have a process for spinning up new boxes, which they already do. So it's been a lot of the work as well.
Nice. And what happens to validators that are inactive, that are not participating neither at Game of Chains nor when ICS actually goes live? And we can talk about timelines in a second, but what will happen with them? Because I guess after all, like all validators have to be active and have to also run on these new chains. Like, what would happen if like some validators are just not taking part at all and just ignoring it, everything?
Well, they'll get slashed for downtime and jailed on the hub. That means they won't be validating anymore until they get the consumer chain up and running. And I don't anticipate this. That sounds dramatic, and I guess it is, but I don't anticipate it really being a problem because the thing is, just by the way that consensus works, if more than 1/3 of the validators, if there's a serious problem with consumer chain, and that results in more than 1/3 of the validators not being able to or not wanting to bring it up, then the consumer chain itself won't run, and nobody will be slashed for downtime. So I think the cases where you have validators where we have cases where validators, like less than 1/3 of validators kind of aren't running something, I think you can say that's more kind of on those validators rather than, you know, a problem of the consumer chain. And that could be tweaked as well. I mean, that probably we'd have to do a little bit more work on that, because that gets kind of deep into the Tendermint internals, but you could also make it so that like you've got to have, you know, 3/4 of validators running consumer chain. So, and what we also will probably do an easier change is that we'll have probably very long on consumer chains at first. We'll let you validators be down for a much longer time. So on the hub right now, if you're down for more than like, I think 16 hours, that's where you get downtime. But on consumer chains, we might relax that a lot, at least at first, so that people have a little bit more of a margin for error during the time when everyone's learning about how it works.
Yeah, but I guess that will basically... Yeah, go ahead.
Go. I was just going to say, this also speaks to the, you know, the reason why a program like this is, the Game of Chains program, is really important, because it kind of helps validators understand what are the kind of challenges they're going to have to face when they're actually doing this in production.
Yeah.